My name is Ken Figueredo, and I represent InterDigital, which is a technology innovation company in the communications and IoT sectors. So we develop and license technologies, and part of our work within the IIC is to see how those technologies can be applied primarily in the areas of IoT platforms.
Thanks, Ken. My name is Jim Morrish. I am chair of the Business Strategy Task Group, which sits within the Business Strategy and Solution Lifecycle Working Group of the IIC, and I'm also a co-chair of that organisation. So thanks, Ken. It's great to be here. Can you just tell me why businesses want to move to the industrial Internet of Things?
Well, I think firstly, there's a lot of opportunity. So there's a group of businesses that see new opportunities from connecting to devices, gathering data from sensors, and using that information to improve their performance. So there's a camp that's opportunity driven, there's a camp that's necessity driven. They're part of supply chains, or they provide devices or technology to other companies that are implementing IIoT solutions, and they need to move with their business partners. You have multiple different motivations driving the industry.
Yeah, it's that wave movement you were highlighting there, I think, which really stands out to me. It's not necessarily a choice to deploy these things. It's a necessity to keep up with the way the competition is moving. It's a next wave of technology, and frankly, it's a question of adopting it or being outcompeted and seeing market share decline.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that brings us nicely on to the reason for our work with the business strategy innovation framework. Certainly from some of the conversations I've had with companies at the IIC, there's a certain trepidation about the industrial internet. Yes. It takes companies outside of their comfort zone. There's a lot of talk about new technologies that they have to master, and that's one of the motivations for the framework, and part of the reason why we got involved.
Absolutely, and it's much same as my perspective coming into the work. You have an IT, an information technology department, and you have an operations technology department, and they tend to think in different ways. They just work according to a different cadence. And not only that, but you have a disruptive impact as IoT is introduced to an organisation, because it's not clear who should introduce it into the organisation. In many ways, the person that does introduce it begins to encroach in some ways on the territory of others. It's quite a complex and political thing. It's unknown, and essentially, from my perspective, what I think we were trying to achieve was put our arms around all of that complexity and de-risk it, so that at least when somebody comes to adopt or consider adopting IoT technologies and solutions, we can at least say that this is the landscape of things that you're going to have to deal with, and this is what's different specifically about IoT versus what you might have come across in your corporate experience beforehand.
Absolutely. And to be clear for people watching this discussion, we wanted to approach it from a business strategy, a commercial perspective, because there's a layer of executives, senior executives, who aren't closely involved in technology. There's a lot of talk about technology, but technology is not the only element that will help you implement the IIoT. So our work, I would say, is very much framed and grounded in terms of some of the business concepts that senior executives need to master.
Yes, and not only that, but we undertook it and we developed it in a way where it can be implemented piecemeal. So it's not, here's a business strategy innovation framework, you've got to do everything according to as we've described and prescribed. Yeah, we recognise that companies might have their own processes, their own way of doing developments, their own way of doing business cases, and that's fine. But what we wanted to do is highlight other things that needed to be covered or addressed to deploy those IoT solutions. So it's very much intended to be complementary of what already exists within an organisation, and just facilitate and ease that path to adoption of IoT solutions.
Before we go into a lot of detail about industry dynamics, I think it's worth spending a few moments talking about the business strategy and innovation framework. And what it is it's almost like a checklist of items you have to address as you're starting to familiarize yourself with the IIoT and to start to think about how you bring the IIoT into your organization. So the starting point is the market context, to look at the market and think about it not just in the traditional way that you look at markets as a pump manufacturer or a supplier of equipment into hospitals, but there's a slightly different market context because of what the IIoT enables. So you begin with the market context. Based on that, you then start to think about your IIoT strategy, which is a combination of your existing strategy and changes brought about by IIoT opportunities. We then talk a little bit about business model innovation. So this is how organizations will have to start to think about change. Within business model innovation, we talk about ideas for generating ideas, new application opportunities, how you start to prepare the organization to absorb those ideas and roll them out. We talk about an evaluation framework because you'll have many different ideas and there's a certain amount of prioritization that's involved there. And then initiation, how do you take the first steps of rolling out some of these ideas in your organization? And then the execution phase depends on what we call an IIoT foundation. And an IIoT foundation has two principal elements. One is a center of excellence. Companies are going to need new skills, new expertise. A center of excellence may house that capability internally, or a center of excellence may involve working with partners that bring in other areas of expertise. And then the second component in terms of an IIoT foundation is what do organizations do in terms of IIoT platforms? So platforms are the middleware capabilities that allow organizations to connect devices, to manage devices remotely, to maintain and upgrade applications. How does all that work? What are the decision factors companies need to take into consideration when they are making a platform investment? And there's a lot more detail that on each of those topics in the framework document.
Thanks, Ken. And it's worth highlighting as well some of the next things that we're doing as well to flow from this overall framework document, because whilst we went into some considerable level of detail in many areas, there were some things which really stuck out that we needed to focus on more and get into in more depth. And the first of those was really highlighting and identifying what the total potential for IoT and for industrial IoT solutions is. And one of the things that we're doing there is we're setting up relationships with the guys within the IIC who are running test beds. So test beds are some really leading edge, pushing the envelope, technical deployments of new solutions and creative ideas. And there's a whole series of these things being deployed by some of the the biggest and best companies in the tech industry. And what we're seeking to do is extract the learnings from them. What do they really find out about what the total potential for industrial IoT is? And when we pull that back together, we think it's going to help us to define what the edge of the envelope is effectively on the foreseeable horizon for IoT, and really help to identify the potential. And that's something that we're developing at the moment and will be published, we expect later this year, 2017, and just as a guideline of what can be done and as an input to that ideation element. The next thing that we're looking at is a maturity index, a maturity model, effectively. And this is one of the things that sits within, effectively, the centre of excellence that you mentioned earlier. And it's about identifying what best practices both within the industry that the company sits and also outside of it, within the wider IoT space. What are the best approaches for approaching or best ways to approach ideation? What are the best practices in terms of deploying platforms, etc.? So we're going to pull all of that together as an asset, as a tool that a project manager sitting within an enterprise can compare himself to, or compare that enterprise to, and figure out what the next steps should be in terms of their overall IoT journey. What's the next things that need to be focused on in developing a first-class IoT strategy? And then the last thing that we're focusing on, and it's a really key topic at the moment, within the industry and within the end user base as well, is understanding security and the appropriate levels of security for a specific problem. It's very easy. I mean, security is a big issue. It's a very important thing, but you don't need the same level of security for all solutions. A set of scales which are connected scales and would relay a weight reading every day needs a different level of security to a nuclear power station, and we need to disentangle that and figure out and provide some guidance as to what appropriate levels of security are, because security costs. It costs money in terms of deploying the capability into the device. It costs in terms of user convenience and the user experience. It costs in terms of battery consumption. So all of these things need to be optimized in some way. And that's something we're going to try and develop a tool to advise and help project managers deploy those solutions.
Yeah.
It's very much action-oriented and again about facilitating the adoption of IoT.
Yeah, and it's fair to say that the work that we've done so far, the work that we're planning to do, is done very collaboratively with other companies within the IIC. I mean, the initial set of work, had yourself, InterDigital, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, and Bosch Software Innovations. But the group is growing, and we're really looking for other companies to get involved, both in terms of bringing in expertise, but also the IIC provides a wonderful environment for hands-on experience. So we link our work very much to what's going on in the testbed arena. So there's a mix of thinking about the issues, but also experimenting and testing those issues on real IIoT applications.
Yes, yeah, I very much agree. It's a great environment for instance, when we're looking at the security assessment. There are people in the building that we can just go and talk to who sit in companies that specialise in security. So it's a great environment to just get access to that richness of experience.
Absolutely.